Hello crafters, it's Nicole and I'm so glad to have you over on my channel. I've got a great project for you today that I think you're really going to love. It's a faux watercolor technique that's going to give you a really realistic tie-dye look with your projects. This is a part of the April 2021 Altenew video hop. Of course, there is a giveaway going on with this. So if you are viewing this video in April of 2021, around the 16th, 17th, 18th, you'll want to check down into the description for all of the details on how you can enter into the giveaway and maybe win a great prize from Altenew. As promised for this technique, I'm using the Dye Motifs Stamp Set, and you can see that these three circular elements are designed to actually work together. And what I love about these is that you don't really have to get them aligned. You can just stack them right on top of each other however you like, and they work out perfectly. So I'm using three different colors today and creating with a really cool faux watercolor technique. And this is going to create a realistic tie-dye look, as if you had actually done this with the rubber bands and the inks and the colors. So this first color that I'm using is yellow ochre, and as you can see, I'm stamping it up and then just spritzing it with a little bit of plain water and applying it down onto some watercolor cardstock. Now, watercolor cardstock is definitely important for this technique because we want to make sure that the paper is going to be able to absorb the ink and not pill up and bubble up and do all those funky things that regular paper does. So I'm just going around and adding in a random number of these large images and just trying to fill in the space. I've created a piece here that's larger than what my final card size will be, so that way I can cut it down to the final 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 size. So after I make sure that this entire first layer is dry, I'm going to start layering in my second and third layers. Now this is where it gets kind of tricky. You might think that those colors are just all going to mush together and you're going to end up with a muddy mess. But that's why you want to make sure that each layer is dry before you move on to the next layering of ink. So for this second layer, I'm using Dewdrops, and this is a pretty light color, so I'm having to re-ink my stamp each time. And so I just stamp it and add in a little bit of water and then stamp it down on the paper. So I'm just repeating this process, putting the stamp over each of the yellow stamped images. And what do you get when you mix blue with yellow? Of course, you get kind of a shade of green. So there is going to be some mixing of colors, but it's very controlled because the yellow underneath is already dry. So the only places that are going to blend is where the blue is actually touching yellow. And in the places where the blue sits on its own, it stays blue. So then I'm waiting for my panel to dry again, and I will repeat this process with my third color, which is fuchsia. And at this point, you're probably thinking, wow, she's really going crazy with this idea. I can't believe that this color is not mixing together, and it won't. So with that first layer and the second layer completely dry, adding the fuchsia on top is pretty risk-free. So you just have to remember what your color combinations will end up being. So yellow and pink kind of makes an orange-ish color, and of course, blue and pinkish colors make more of a purple. So when all three of them are blended together, you will actually get a decent combination. What happens with the muddiness is when you mix yellow, blue, and pink together, you might not get a desirable color, but because it's controlled with the drying underneath, there's really not much of an issue here. And we end up with these really, really cool tie-dyed looks. So now that I've got my panel complete, I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of spatter. So the panel is completely dry. I'm just using the same ink and wetting it down with a water brush and adding in some spatter. So this just adds some visual interest into the spaces in between. Since I won't be doing much else to this card, I didn't want it to be so plain Jane. All right, so the final step here is to get a sentiment ready and put this card together. So I grabbed a sentiment from this same Dye Motif stamp set, and I've got that inked up on a beautiful kind of aqua color that kind of matches the Dewdrops shade of ink that I used. And I just stamped that sentiment in black, and I'm going to adhere this strip right onto the card. So as you can see, I cut down that larger panel into a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 piece and added it to a card base. So I do have some extra little strips that I can use for another project. And here I'm using my mat to make sure that I've got my sentiment strip nice and even. Sometimes I use a T-square, but I've been using the mat a little bit more lately because it's right there and I'm always creating on it. So with that dry, I just flip it over and cut off any excess that I need to cut off. And I'm just going to go ahead and add on a few enamel dots. And if you follow my channel, of course, you know that I'm always kind of doing these in groups of 3. So I'm deciding what colors that I really want to use from this particular set and where exactly I want to place them. And this is where the pokey tool actually comes in really handy. I can stick those dots right onto the pokey tool. And as you can see here, I can kind of move it around and decide where I want each element to be before I commit and press it down onto the card. And that's all there is to creating a beautiful watercolor realistic tie-dye look. I hope you enjoyed this little project and that it gets you really excited about trying the faux watercolor technique. You can do this with just about any stamp and get amazing results. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. I'd love to have you here more often. Thank you for spending a few precious minutes with me today. I really do appreciate all the support that you give my channel. I'll be back soon with more crafty inspiration, but until next time, happy crafting. Help support my craft education efforts by giving this video a thumbs up and clicking on the subscribe button and bell so you'll get notified when I create new content just for you. If you're looking for some more crafty inspiration, how about one of these videos?